what is North Star alignment about? Well, the North Star idea comes about from ancient mariners who in the Northern Hemisphere used to use the North Star as a means of calibrating how far they traveled and how far they had to go. And the North Star, or sometimes called Polaris, is the star that sits directly above the Earth's North Pole. And in the night sky is the star that doesn't appear to move while all the other stars are in orbit. Apparently, it looks like they're all cycling around the North Star. It's the only one that has a fixed position. Right. So hence the North Star. In the DER work that we did, the book DER, where we were talking about Apanova and Veolia and the utility companies, what we were talking about there, their simile metaphor for this was the beacon on the hill. And that goes back to medieval Europe, where there were always wars taking place. And if somebody invaded your country, the way you'd tell everybody else in the country is you climb to the top of the nearest hill and light a big bonfire. And so they became beacons on hills. So if there was any before, we had telegraphic communication, the way you would tell the villages, then 20 miles away, is that the invaders were coming, is you'd set fire to the beacon on the hill and you could raise the alarm, right? So it was like a call to arms, if you like. So beacon on the hill is a good metaphor, and it's used in different ways in different places. And I may have shared with you one of the early times I was talking about this a few years ago in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia. And somebody said, no, we can't have the North Star. We can't see it. And I go, no, it's just it's a mindset thing. It's a pattern, it's a behavior. And I go, yeah, but there's no point in calling it the North Star. We need something else. So we settled finally on the Southern Cross. But to calibrate the Southern Cross and where south is, it takes a little bit. You've got to use your fingers and then do all sorts of weird stuff. But the whole idea is, if that doesn't work for you, come up with a metaphor, come up with a simile, come up with a meaning which allows everybody to align in that direction. One of the reasons why the software package called Parallel is called Parallel is because, to a very large extent, that alignment creates all this parallel work, creates this energy and enthusiasm within an organization to go in the same direction. So let's get practical about it, and let's move to the North Star alignment template. If you come and do a refresher on the ACX Masters, you'll find that this moves from being one of the last things that we do in the program to being one of the first things that we do. It was only in late 2019 where we were allowed to actually start talking about this publicly. The templates that Amazon use have other things on them as well, in terms of calibration and metrics and things. But this is the simplified version that we're strong advocates for at the individual level or team or even organizational level. Just check the chat room. Okay. So good comments there. Yeah. So what this basically is about is there's two dimensions to it. There's the organizational dimension, A, B, C, as you can see highlighted in orange, and then either the individual, team, larger or part of the organization or whatever, from D to I. You'll see that it's also annotated in the way that if you look at box F, that's the smart SCOT measures. So again, that's number 7 on the successful customer outcome canvas. I also briefly sort of said is, of those measures for that category of customer, which would be the leading measure? Which would be the measure, that the ring that rules them all? Which one would be that leading measure? And in many organizations, that becomes the North Star metric. That's a symbol of turning this idea into a metric that we can all gather around and all agree upon. Right? So what we do is you do ABC, complete box ABC. And here I put an example in with somebody's permission from a couple of months ago. So this was an African country, not South Africa. And you could see what's the main strategic drivers in your organization now in 2 years: survival, and then generate profits against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic and changing customer needs. Developing a laser-like focus on a successful customer outcome strategy. What worthy things to be doing. That's fantastic. What are the projects initiatives that are driving those objectives? And then you can see there's a bunch of those. And then how is the organization currently measuring success? So it's measuring success, as we said, if you do that KPI audit and you look at the 100 top metrics, probably 80% of them are going to be measures of output. So there's a need to shift away from that. So A, B, C are not necessarily right or wrong. They just are. It is what is. And then, as you can see, when we get to answering the questions of D to I, we're answering them in the context in this instance of the team who were doing some work. So how does your work you're doing contribute? Well, we improve the process, reduce the waste, improve the service, increase profits, reduce costs. Triple crown, right? What are the projects that you're involved with that deliver A? So internal customer experience, right? And a new ERP, so putting Microsoft Dynamic in, right? How should the organization measure success and how can you change it? So it's all self-explanatory, and the questions are not questions that you need a degree in customer experience to answer, but they're allowing us to calibrate and ask out. So when we're box I, for instance, what measurements can you introduce which would help the organization both deliver its strategic objectives, but also begin to move the organization into thinking in a more customer-centric way. So less focus on what we're doing and more focus on what we're delivering. So that's the old principles. This is one of the latter exercises that I'm going to ask you to do, and consistent with the learning that you've done. We're changing the order of the masters slightly, but consistent with what you've done is it should be in this place, because it fits in alignment with thinking of organization structures. And then there's a prelude now to how we take an enterprise-wide real focus and move through doing that. Any questions on the NSAT, North Star Alignment template? And as I keep saying, this isn't about, there's no test at the end of this for you to tell me what's in box H of the North Star Alignment template. That's just a question of recall. That's not a question of understanding. So when you fill it in, and I said we start our discussion on a 101, the first thing we'll be looking at is the North Star Alignment template. I've seen the other exercises you've done, that's great. But this is one of the last ones. But this will tell me whether you've got it. If you know what I mean? And so we'll look at this in the context of your own work and how it contributes to the organizational dynamic. Again, I'll say, do this as close as you can to the reality of what you're doing at the moment. If you don't want to do that, do it for somebody you've worked with, and retrospectively think about D to I.
Steve,
would you recommend that you use this template with your stakeholders as well? So not just kind of as an evaluation tool for your own kind of outcomes. I nearly said output.
Ooh.
Ouch! No swear words here. But would you advocate for this to be used more broadly?
We do.
Kind of almost create it as an alignment piece, because I mean it talks about alignment, but if it's only being used in a singular instance, then it becomes very singular focused.
Yeah. And to your other point as well earlier on is, yes, you can nest them. So organizations who are very fluent outside in, who've been doing it for a number of years, they'll establish the strategic imperative and intent, and they'll give people their ABC. And then that rolls out across the organization, and everybody, this is for your 360 review performance cycles. It's for the work we're doing in projects. And why are we doing this project work if it's not North Star aligned? Show me where the justification for it is, and we use the template for that as well. Other organizations are adopting it because there's lots of different ways of managing strategy to execution, but turning this into a real thing, it needs to be kept simple and it needs to be scalable. So exactly, Jeanette, sorry. I'm reading like different screen names there as well. To that extent, yes, it is. It can be nested. It can be at the individual team, organization, enterprise level. It can be right across we've done it across that Danish company I was talking about, right the way across their supply chain. And we've got every element of the supply chain to contribute to theirs, and then to see whether there was a consistency or not, because it tells us whether we're on the same page. It tells us whether we're North Star aligned, which is its purpose. You might also, without sort of getting too much into how folks like Amazon and people like that do it, is you can also do like a red, amber, green analysis. and start putting a string of metrics along the bottom. But again, that's for another level of sophistication. We do talk about that a little bit in the champions, about how they each link with each other and how you could nest them and where would you start if you were doing that. But to introduce it at this stage and let you do an exercise around it will cause you to ask a lot of those sort of questions. Okay, sorry, somebody else was going to say something. Yes,
yeah,
please.
Steve, this is David.
Hey, David.
So contrast for me the North Star alignment, because as you sort of introduced this over the last couple of days, and I've not been exposed to this until this moment. I was thinking that the kind of the end game of this tool was to get to, and I'll use BMW because it's simple. I was thinking that box I would be joy, would be that sort of end game alignment to the organization. So somewhere I've missed the contrast between this and the earlier tools where, and I'll just use BMW. I mean, if BMW were to do this, do they get to joy at box I or not?
The way we do it now, you know, different coaches, different mentors, different consultants will do this in the way that suits them. We use this as our starting point. So when I'm starting a project with new clients, the first thing I bring out is a North Star alignment template before we do the OSIM and the SCOC. Now, why do I do that? Well, I want to understand both the strategic intent without getting bogged down in all the strategic planning cycles and things like that. But then I also want to understand in terms of the stakeholders and sponsors, do they have a grip on, you know, as it says here, box D to I? Have they actually thought about it in the context of the strategy? Because in essence, the strategy that you've got at the moment, whether you're outside in or not, is where everybody should be pointing. And we talk about strategy to execution. So you're quite right, David, in observing that from the educated point of view, somebody who understands customer experience and how we build a performance landscape, yes, box I would tend towards that. But on first contact, it's really around populating this in the way that it just is what it is. And then we use it to say, right, we need to focus more attention here. So if, for instance, the measurement system is all outputs based, and it says, what measures can you introduce? Well, I would be saying, okay, so just as we've discussed, if a measure of output and efficiency is making a car, what's the business outcome of making a car? Well, it's a sale. Great, okay. So what you should be talking about is less output measures and more the outcome of what's achieved. Now, that's a very simple example, but you can see if people can progress from the performance landscape thinking of outputs and what's the result of the outputs, the outcome. To do the North Star alignment template, they don't need to have done any of that. They don't need to be there yet. But bringing out the differences between measuring what you do and measuring what you deliver is important, and we can do it without needing to educate them to that point with this template.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I had not grasped that this was your entry point. I was thinking this was your sort of down the road tool, but as the entry point, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and just as I was saying a few minutes ago, if you come on the program, say next year for a refresher or anything like that, you'll find this is one of the first things we do on the program. And why are we doing that? Well, the way the program's evolving is as new techniques and tools become available to us and we can integrate them, this is the organization guidance system. However, we realized, mid last year when we were doing this in one organization, getting them to do this once they already understand all the other stuff is they'll do exactly as you've just done there, David. They'll say, okay, isn't box I what we've got on the OSIM and the SCOC, and it's the business we're in and it's our successful customer outcome? And the answer is yes, but you really want to catch them before they've got to that level of thinking so that they're truthful and direct with you about their team's contribution to the overall strategy. And some things come out of that, like you realize the strategy is not aligned to be customer centric. You go, and they go, oh my goodness me. So you go, okay, so what are you going to do about it? Because you can't go and tell them the strategy's wrong. So you need to be changing it. So as the ship is heading towards the iceberg, we need to set a new course. We need to start shifting course. So what are you going to do to that? Are you going to move more chairs around on the deck? Are you actually going to get in the wheelhouse and get your hands on some of the stuff in there and help them shift direction away from the iceberg.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, there was another comment. Was it Greg? No.
No, it's fine, Steve. I think I wanted to know how come it wasn't done. Now you just explained it.
Okay.